The Bermuda Triangle. Ships disappear without a trace. Aircraft vanish from radar screens. Compasses swing wildly. An expanse of the Atlantic Ocean where the usual rules of navigation and physics seem not to apply. That is the legend. Stories of ghostly forces, secret portals, and unexplained vanishings have captured the public imagination for decades. But here is what you rarely hear. Thousands of vessels and aircraft pass through this region every single day without incident. The United States Coast Guard does not recognize it as unusually dangerous. And when investigators examine the so-called mysteries most closely, the explanations are usually far more ordinary and far less supernatural than the myth suggests. So we must ask the question directly: what is the truth about the Bermuda Triangle? Is it a genuine anomaly defying science and reason? Or has it become history's most enduring and successful myth? Tonight, we push past sensationalism and look at the documented record, separating legend from what we can actually verify. Before we examine the stories, we must first define what people mean when they say, the Bermuda Triangle. There is no official boundary, no government designation, no agency responsible for this zone on any nautical chart. The term refers to a loosely defined region of the western North Atlantic Ocean encompassing roughly 500,000 square miles of open water. Most descriptions connect 3 points on the map: Miami, Florida on the United States mainland, San Juan, Puerto Rico in the Caribbean, and the island of Bermuda to the north. These points form a rough triangle that lives largely in popular culture rather than in maritime or aviation records. Some writers have expanded that outline to include parts of the Gulf of Mexico and broader stretches of Caribbean Sea, but again, no official source recognizes a fixed triangle. Mariners and aviators chart courses through this area as part of normal navigation routes between North America, the Caribbean, and Europe. The modern myth began in print in the early 1950s. In 1950, journalist Edward Van Winkle Jones wrote in the Associated Press about unexplained incidents in the region. 2 years later, author George X. Sand used the term Bermuda Triangle in an article published in Fate magazine. The name stuck. Then, in 1964, Vincent Gaddis, also writing in Fate, published an article titled The Deadly Bermuda Triangle. Gaddis linked several disappearances and speculated on mysterious causes. These pieces caught the curiosity of the public, but it was the 1974 best-selling book by Charles Berlitz, titled The Bermuda Triangle, that cemented the legend. Berlitz's book sold widely and drew on sensational interpretations of ship and plane disappearances, often without careful reference to evidence. In the decades since, the Bermuda Triangle has become a fixture of novels, documentaries, and films. It is a place where stories of extraordinary forces, extraterrestrials, lost continents, and time anomalies have been pressed into service to explain what should be mundane tragedies. The reputation exists in pop culture as a zone of supernatural chaos. But the question remains: is this reputation merited when compared to other parts of the world's oceans? Is the triangle genuinely more perilous than any comparable stretch of open sea? Or do the stories tell us more about human imagination and confirmation bias than they do about the ocean itself? To evaluate the Bermuda Triangle, we study the incidents most often cited as evidence of its inexplicable nature. Each case carries its own story, its own tragedy, and unfortunately, loss of life. We will recount these events as they were recorded, then compare them with what investigators and historians later determined. Flight 19. December 5, 1945. One of the most cited events in Triangle lore is the disappearance of Flight 19. On a clear December morning in 1945, 5 U.S. Navy TBM Avenger torpedo bombers took off from Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale on a routine training mission. The squadron was led by Lieutenant Charles Taylor and included 14 crew members in total. Radio transmissions from Flight 19 soon indicated confusion. Taylor reported he could not find west despite repeated turns. He asked whether his compasses were malfunctioning. Others in the flight echoed the concern that the ocean below looked unfamiliar. Then the communications ceased. A rescue aircraft, a PBM Mariner flying boat with a crew of 13, was dispatched to locate the missing Avengers. That aircraft also vanished. In total, 27 men and 6 aircraft were lost. The mythic version posits malfunctioning compasses, a portal of warped space, or some other anomaly leading these planes away from all hope of return. But the best documented explanation points to a combination of human error and environmental conditions. Weather that day was changing more quickly and unpredictably than pilots expected. Taylor, the flight leader, was experienced flying out of Miami, but less familiar with missions departing from Fort Lauderdale. Navigational errors under those conditions can compound rapidly. Without reliable reference points and with time pressure to maintain radio silence, the flight likely flew in circles until fuel exhaustion forced them down into the open sea. The rescue Mariner was known for fuel system problems. Reports from nearby ships indicated it may have exploded in midair. No wreckage from the planes was ever recovered, but the most plausible scenario is that this tragedy was the result of navigational confusion and poor weather, not some supernatural force. USS Cyclops, March 1918. The story of USS Cyclops is another that appears in lists of Bermuda Triangle mysteries. The Cyclops was a United States Navy cargo ship over 500 feet long, carrying 306 crew and passengers. In March 1918, she departed Barbados, bound for Baltimore. She never arrived. No distress signal was sent. No wreckage was found. To this day, she remains the largest non-combat loss of life in U.S. Navy history. Mystery accounts sometimes describe this as a ship swallowed by a portal between dimensions, or lost to forces unknown. The reality is less exotic but just as tragic. Investigations have long noted that the Cyclops was heavily loaded with manganese ore, a dense mineral, at over 11,000 tons. One of her 2 engines was already out of service. Reports from the period also indicate she sailed directly into a storm system that intensified quickly. The combination of being overloaded, impaired propulsion, and heavy seas could easily have led to structural failure and rapid sinking. If a sudden catastrophe struck, the crew might not have had time to radio for help. In deep ocean waters, wreckage would sink swiftly out of sight. This explanation fits better with what we know of ship design, loads, and weather than does any supernatural interpretation. Carroll A. Deering, January 1921. The Carroll A. Deering was a 5-masted commercial schooner found run aground off Diamond Shoals, North Carolina in January 1921. When a boarding party reached the vessel, they found it abandoned. The crew's personal effects and the captain's log were missing. The galley had been set for a meal. Lifeboats were gone. The site was eerie. Speculation leapt to ghost ship territory. But evidence points to a different scenario. This was the era of prohibition in the United States. Rum-running ships and crews sometimes faced violent internal conflicts. Some investigators believe the crew may have mutinied, left the ship under duress or voluntarily, and escaped in lifeboats. Others note that storms in the area that winter were severe, and several other vessels were lost around the same time. In other words, a mix of bad weather and possible human conflict fits the available facts more closely than unexplained forces. Star Tiger and Star Ariel, 1948 and 1949. 2 British South American Airways passenger aircraft. The Star Tiger and Star Ariel disappeared without trace in separate incidents in January 1948 and January 1949. Both were Tudor 4 aircraft flying transatlantic routes over the Atlantic. The losses attracted wide attention. Conspiracy theories claim the planes vanished mid-flight or were abducted by unknown powers. Investigators have pointed instead to a combination of factors. The Tudor 4 had known design limitations, including unreliable heating and fuel management systems. Flight crews sometimes flew lower to maintain cabin warmth, increasing risk of atmospheric icing. Mechanical failures and fuel exhaustion remain the most credible explanations. No wreckage from either aircraft was ever definitively found, but the conditions and aircraft history offer rational causes. Witchcraft, December 1967. Finally, the case of the cabin cruiser Witchcraft. On a December night near Miami, the owner, Dan Burak, and Father Patrick Horgan called the Coast Guard to say they had struck something and needed a tow. The Coast Guard arrived within 20 minutes. The boat and its occupants were gone. No trace of wreckage or bodies was ever found. Popular retellings call this disappearance eerie proof of the triangle's power. But consider this, the term unsinkable applied to a boat does not make it so. A strong hull breach or collision with submerged debris could sink a vessel rapidly, especially at night. In open water, strong currents and weather can carry debris and bodies far from the point of sinking. The absence of wreckage does not mean a supernatural event occurred. It means the ocean is vast and recovery in deep water is often impossible. So what explains the pattern of disappearances when taken together? We separate fact from myth with 6 grounded, scientifically supported reasons. 1. Heavy traffic. This region of the Atlantic is one of the busiest on Earth. Shipping lanes move goods between the eastern United States, South America, the Caribbean, and Europe. Airlines route transatlantic flights through these skies as well. When you have high traffic counts, you will also have higher absolute numbers of incidents. That is a matter of statistics, not anomaly. On a per-mile or per-hour basis, the rate of accidents in the Bermuda Triangle does not exceed many other ocean regions. 2. The Gulf Stream. A powerful ocean current called the Gulf Stream runs through this part of the Atlantic at speeds often exceeding 4 or 5 miles per hour. Its strength can scatter debris and bodies over large areas quickly. Wreckage from a sunken vessel or crashed aircraft may travel far from the point of sinking in a short time. That makes locating and documenting wrecks exceptionally difficult. A lack of surface debris is not evidence of the inexplicable. It is evidence of strong currents. 3. Weather patterns. Tropical storms, hurricanes, and sudden squalls are common in this region, especially from late summer into autumn. Water spouts and violent weather can develop rapidly. Before the era of modern weather radar and forecasting, ships and aircraft could be caught with little warning. A violent storm system can sink a vessel or down an aircraft without survivors or surface wreckage. These weather realities explain many of the incidents attributed to mystery. 4. Deep ocean. Some parts of this region drop to nearly 20,000 feet of depth in places like the Puerto Rico Trench. Recovery of wreckage from such depth is complex, expensive, and often impossible with older technology. In the 1940s and 1950s, such searches were almost certainly beyond capability. Even today, deep ocean exploration is challenging. The ocean floor remains largely unmapped. The absence of evidence is not evidence of paranormal forces. It is evidence of how little we have explored. 5. Human errors. This cannot be overstated. Navigation mistakes, equipment failure, overloading cargo, inexperienced crews, misreading weather data. These are responsible for the vast majority of maritime and aviation losses worldwide. Before GPS, compasses and dead reckoning were often all a pilot or captain had to rely on. A single miscalculation can cascade into disaster, especially over open water. Human error is a far more grounded explanation than exotic alternatives. 6. Methane hydrates. The one interesting theory. There is one hypothesis that stands out for scientific intrigue. Methane hydrates are crystals of methane gas trapped in sediments on the seafloor under immense pressure. In theory, a sudden release of methane could reduce the density of the water above, causing a ship to lose buoyancy and sink rapidly. Bubbles rising to the surface might also affect aircraft engines. This phenomenon has been demonstrated in controlled laboratory settings and is considered plausible in certain geological conditions elsewhere in the world. But here is the key point: there is no documented evidence that such an event has occurred within the Bermuda Triangle. It remains theoretical in this context. It is scientifically interesting but not a confirmed cause of any specific disappearance. It cannot bear the weight of the legend. When we look at the numbers and the documented facts, a sober picture emerges. The U.S. Coast Guard has stated plainly that after reviewing many aircraft and vessel losses in the area over the years, investigators have found nothing to indicate that casualties were the result of anything other than physical causes. No extraordinary factors have been identified in official records. If the Bermuda Triangle were uniquely perilous, commercial shipping insurers like Lloyd's of London would charge higher premiums for routes through it. They do not. Insurance costs reflect risk, and there is no data showing elevated risk specific to this region. Studies by independent organizations, including the Worldwide Fund for Nature, have list charts of the world's most dangerous waters. Areas such as the South China Sea are statistically more hazardous than the Atlantic near Bermuda. Yet those areas do not carry the same mystique in popular imagination. We must also consider the role of Charles Berlitz's book in shaping public perception. While widely read, the book contained numerous factual inaccuracies. Some events cited as unexplained mysteries occurred outside the commonly quoted boundaries of the triangle. Others had solutions known at the time that Berlitz omitted. The sheer volume of cases he presented, often unsupported by reliable records, gave the impression of a pattern where none existed. Then there is confirmation bias. Once a storyline takes hold, this place is where things vanish inexplicably. Every new incident is filtered through that lens. Disappearances outside the triangle receive far less attention. Incidents with mundane explanations are forgotten, while the dramatic elements are amplified. The Bermuda Triangle myth feeds on our appetite for the mysterious. But myth does not equal reality. Statistical analysis, official investigations, and physical evidence all point to explanations grounded in known natural factors. When we strip away the sensationalism, the triangle looks much like any other busy stretch of ocean subject to heavy traffic, complex weather, and human limitations. So does the Bermuda Triangle exist? Yes, as a geographic region of the Atlantic. Does the mystery that surrounds it hold up under scrutiny? No. When we account for traffic volume, powerful currents, severe weather, deep ocean, and human error, the supposed anomaly dissolves. That does not diminish the seriousness of these tragedies. Real people died in Flight 19 in USS Cyclops and lost schooners and aircraft. Their deaths were not illusions or trickery by the sea. They were accidents and errors in environments that remain unforgiving. It is important to respect the ocean's danger without inventing forces to explain it. The human mind seeks patterns, especially in loss and uncertainty. We want stories that thrill, that hint at forces beyond our understanding. That impulse is part of our nature. But truth matters more than entertainment. The world is still full of real mysteries. We have explored less than 5% of the ocean floor. There are deep-sea ecosystems we have never observed, geological processes we barely understand, creatures unknown to science, wrecks that rest in darkness beyond our reach. The Bermuda Triangle need not be supernatural to be fascinating. Its legend is a testament to human curiosity, not evidence of broken laws of physics. Before you dismiss this as debunked, consider this. The ocean covers 70% of Earth's surface. That vastness holds wonders and dangers alike. The Bermuda Triangle might not be a place where reality bends, but it is a reminder that even the familiar can hold surprises. Here's my question to you. Do you find it disappointing that the Bermuda Triangle has logical explanations, or are you relieved? Does explaining a legend make the world less interesting, or does understanding reality make it more fascinating? Let us know in the comments. We do not just chase myths. We uncover what is actually unexplained.